He only asked for directions. She couldn't even give him that. And before the harvest moon rose again, the whole village paid for her answer. My grandmother told me this story once. She said something bad happened in a village in the eastern region long before her own grandmother was born. She said the trouble had two faces. They were called Awero and Osio. Osio was the nephew of the paramount chief. He didn't have much bragging rights since he wasn't a prince, but over the years, he had built something beyond his uncle's name, a thriving farm which catered to all the needs of the village and the surrounding areas. His wife, Awero, was the most beautiful woman in the village. She was the most sought-after lady in the village, but she always turned them down, until one day, she met Osio and couldn't turn him down. What made it sweeter was that Osio had proposed to other women before her, women who had looked at him when he was still ordinary and said no. Now, those same women watched Osio making money and finally marrying the one lady they were all envious of. Awero always walked through the village with pride, letting them know what they had once looked down upon now looked up to her. She had a mango tree. Osio had designated it as hers, her shade, her rest, her particular throne on the edge of his farm. He never made her work like the other farm workers. She would sit there in the heat of the afternoon and exist beautifully, something that no other woman in their village could boast of. One day, she was sitting there enjoying the breeze when a man came. He appeared at the farm's edge the way travelers do and approached her respectfully.
Ma'am, please can you give me directions to the nearest village?
Awero looked at him and said nothing. He asked again politely, the way a man asks when he assumes he simply wasn't heard the first time. That's when she turned on him.
Why are you disturbing me? Isn't it obvious I'm from the nearby village? Should I carry you there?
Her voice was not a quiet thing when she used it this way. It cracked across the afternoon and brought Osio running from the other side of the farm. And what Osio saw when he arrived was the man's back as he walked away. Osio did not ask his wife what happened. He reached down, picked up a stone and threw it. It landed close enough. The man stopped, looked at the stone and turned to face Osio. Osio pointed at him and told him, "Never pass through my land again." The man looked at him for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, "Otherwise what?" Osio told him, "Otherwise, you will see the difference between men and men." The man said nothing after that. He simply stared at Osio as if he had made a decision. Then, without another word, he turned and continued walking, disappearing into the trees, and that was that. Or so they thought. That same night, the dogs began to bark. This was not unusual by itself. Village dogs bark. It is their primary contribution to community life. But underneath the barking was something missing. My grandmother said the old people noticed it first. The ones whose sleep is light and whose ears are still tuned to the old frequencies. They realized that the crickets had gone silent, every last one of them. The following night, the night bird stopped singing as well. Awero mentioned it to Osio. She felt that something strange had happened, but he dismissed it and told her it was probably nothing, so she let it go. The third night, the dogs also went quiet. The village woke up to a silence it had no word for. For the first time in all their lives, there were no dogs. Neither the owned or the stray dogs were around. Many thought the dogs might be foraging nearby, but it still filled them with curiosity and unease. That evening, the fog came. It arrived at dusk, thick and deliberate, enveloping every tree that ringed the village until the tree line disappeared entirely. The village was still visible but still fogged. Whatever stood among those trees was no longer visible from the village. The chief called the priest. The priest went into his consultation and said something was coming. He couldn't say what exactly, only that it was coming and that it was already closer than the tree line. Meanwhile, in Osio's house, Awero went to bathe in the outside bathhouse. But something made her look up as she left the bathhouse. The man from the farm was standing by the neem tree adjacent to their house, standing still and watching her. She quickly walked back to the house, and the whole way she felt his eyes on her back. She told Osio, and he went outside angrily. He stood in the yard and looked around, but there was no one there. The emptiness seemed to confirm everything he already believed about his wife's imagination. He came back inside. He asked if she was sure. She said yes. She saw him. She was sure. The following day, Awero was at the mango tree, her shade, the place that belonged to her, when she suddenly felt the eyes. It was the precise sensation of being watched by something or someone. She turned left, right, behind her. The farm was empty in every direction, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. Something shifted in her chest. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Awero became afraid. She didn't call for her husband. She simply stood up and began walking toward the house quickly. Later, Osio came to look for her, but she wasn't there. He searched the farm. He searched the path. He found nothing, and so he went back to the house to see if she had gone home without his knowledge. And there she was. He was furious at the wasted search and the disruption. But when he opened his mouth to speak, Awero's eyes moved to a point behind him. Her face changed. Osio turned. There was the man, standing exactly where he had stood by the neem tree. Same position, same stillness. This time, Osio saw him with his own eyes. Something supernatural about him made him hesitate one full second before his anger reassembled itself. He walked toward the man, demanding to know what he was doing there, who he thought he was, what kind of person he thought he was. Then the man vanished. He didn't step away. He didn't retreat into shadow. Between one blink of an eye and the next, he was simply no longer standing there. Hey! The two of them immediately ran inside and locked the door and stood in the middle of their own room, asking each other, "Did you see it? Did you see exactly what I saw?" Their voices overlapping. Both of them needed the other's mouth to confirm that the ground beneath their certainty was not dissolving. That night, around midnight, the scratching came. It was at the window. Slow, patient, rhythmic. It was neither the sound of an animal nor the sound of a branch. It was the sound of fingers. They lay in the dark and listened to it, and neither of them spoke, and neither of them slept. And when morning came, it was almost a relief, except that morning meant the night would come again. They didn't want to experience it a second time, so they went to the chief priest. He listened to everything without interrupting, and when they finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he told them who they had insulted. Opuekom, a spirit that walks among the living during times of potential famine, not to bring destruction but to assess. He moves through villages and farms in the form of a traveler, watching how people treat a stranger, watching how abundance has arranged itself in human hearts. A spirit that when met with kindness will bless a village's harvest, but when met with contempt, it would make a different kind of assessment. All the man had asked for was directions. The priest looked at them both and said it plainly. Courtesy would have been everything. Instead, according to you, Osio, you threw a stone at the spirit and told it there was a difference between men and men. The priest said they needed to make it right. The two of them left the priest's compound. They looked at each other and burst out laughing. They talked about the harvest. They talked about how ready the crops were. How the priest was an old man with old fears who saw spirits in every inconvenience. They spoke about how this was exactly the kind of superstition that keep villages like theirs from progressing. They didn't notice the man standing a few feet away listening to them. They didn't see him turn and walk back into the forest. They went into the farm the following morning and found silence first. Then came the discovery. The crops were rotten, every single one of them. They walked through the farm in shock, touching plants that crumbled, watching color drain from things that had been full and ready just the previous day. All the surrounding farms were the same. Livestock died in the days that followed, quietly, without visible cause, without wound or illness that any eye could find. The village went hungry. Then the priest sent for them. He asked them what they had done after leaving his compound. They told him that they spoke about the farm, they assessed how they were going to harvest, and then they walked home. Then he watched their faces and saw the moment they remembered what else had happened, what they said, what they laughed about. The priest sent word to the chief, and the village council deliberated over their actions. The result, outright banishment. The chief did not even consider the fact that Osio was his nephew. The chief said, "You had everything going on well for you. How could you be this arrogant?" The couple, who had been first in everything, were escorted to the road with what they could carry, which was less than either of them had ever owned at any point in their lives. Before Osio's farm had made them certain of their own importance, they walked away from the village, regret in every footstep.